The Mindalore incident. Megan Quizette, a housewife in her 30s, was sitting in the lounge finishing off a book she had been reading. She remembers looking at the clock and noting that it was 10 minutes to midnight. Just then, her elder son Andre came into the living room, saying that he had been unable to sleep and that could he make a cup of tea for both of them. She readily agreed, and it was then that she heard her part bred dog, Cheeky, barking outside. Cheeky had recently been knocked down by a passing motor car, and his back had been badly damaged. He had only recently been nursed back to health, and Megan did not want anything else to happen to him. She went outside and called to Cheeky, but she soon realized that he had managed to get outside the gates, and she knew that if she left him, he would bark and disturb the neighbors. She was reading just before midnight on the 3rd of January 1979 in her home in Mindalore, South Africa. Her 12-year-old son Andre entered the living room claiming he couldn't sleep, and getting up to make the two of them a drink. Each could hear their dog barking excitedly outside, and she would open the door to their house expecting to see the dog waiting to come in. However, it soon became apparent that he had somehow ventured out of the gates of the property. So, fearing that this would annoy the neighbors, she went to the front gates, calling her dog to come back, and he continued down the road, seemingly so interested in something that he ignored the commands to return. She then called to Andre to help, as he was the closest to Cheeky out of all the family. Both would venture up Saul Jacob Street until they came to the T junction at the top named Tyndall Road. Beyond there was a new link road for transportation of goods from the increasing factories of the Chemdor and Luperdivil industrial estates. Cheeky, along with several other dogs from the area, stood barking more and more frantically at a bright pink light. At first, she thought that lights had been installed on the new road, but Andre stated that this wasn't the case. Both looked again at the pink glow, now believing it to be a light aircraft coming into land. Fearing that Cheeky may be injured, they moved towards the new road and the pink lights, and strangely they could hear no sound, and as they made their way over the ditches and embankments, each could clearly see the pink lights were not a plane of any kind. The shape of the craft was odd, and it seemed to be, quote, encased in light. As it came closer, they could see that two individual lights at each end of the craft appeared to project a strange glow. As they moved closer still, and with nothing to impede their view, they could see the object land on the road. It was a distinct egg shape, aside from the underside, which had the appearance as though the bottom had been sliced off, so creating a flat edge. From the underside were four spider legs that appeared to support the weight of the craft as it stood, and the color was that of dark metal, and the entire surface was smooth, with no joints or seams. Believing the object was an experimental craft of the South African military, each was more intrigued than afraid. Then 6 men emerged from the craft and stepped onto the ground, each adorned in a one-piece coverall, which, aside from two of them, covered their entire heads. They would split into 3 groups, each seemingly examining a certain part of their surroundings. Megan and Andre would clearly see the two nearest to them. They examined the ground, picking up sand and watching as it slipped through their fingers. One of them spoke substantially more than the other and had a high-pitched voice that, at times, sounded akin to singing. By contrast, the other spoke only occasionally and did so in monosyllables. They couldn't hear the words, only the sounds. Both agreed, however, it was a language completely unfamiliar to them. Megan would later state that the closest language she could match it to would be Chinese. Each of the men began to inspect the tarmac surface of the road, bending down and pressing on it with their hands, and one of them in particular seemed to compare the difference between the tarmac and the sand at the side of the road. It was then they noticed Megan and Andre and began to walk in their direction. One of those heading in their direction had his head uncovered, and Megan would later state that the quote man had thick, dark hair, which was curly, and had a beard. The color of their coverall was white, but the glow from the craft made it look pink when they stood in its light. As they neared them, Megan also noticed that she was considerably taller than them, and she would estimate their height to be around 5 feet, at least half a foot shorter than her. And when the pair were in front of them, the bearded man bowed and said words they didn't understand, but it seemed to be a greeting. All the while, he sustained direct eye contact with Megan, and she felt herself drawn to him. And although his eyes were quite normal, she believed them to be translucent, as if she could look through them. It was then, for reasons she couldn't explain, that a sudden feeling of dread began to wash over her. Almost through instinct, she said to her son, "Go and get Daddy and run. Please run." The two men spoke to each other, again using short words. She continued to stare at them, not moving her eyes from the pair. It was because of this that she found it strange that within what seemed a second, all of the crew were back on board the craft, and the previously open door was now shut, and it left. So it seems that they experienced a humanoid hybrid sighting. That's what it seems to me. Tell me your thoughts down below. Like this video if you liked it. Subscribe for more. I hope you have a good night. Thanks for watching.